if you want to pawn that pawn, like if it's isolated, maybe.
Yeah, because the thing is that
after
pawn wouldn't be
a3 I
isolated,
can
and you
play
can defend it with
b4.
b4. So,
Yeah.
that's actually a strong pawn to win if you can win it. So I thought maybe you would try a3 and then force him to play bishop takes knight. Then after pawn takes, then okay, at least now your pawns are somewhat together. And then if he plays pawn takes pawn, you can play pawn takes, c takes, and then have a strong pawn on d4, and not have your pawns all isolated and stuff. But he played queen c2, which is fine. I thought queen c2 was okay. And then after a6, instead of a4, I thought you were going to play a3 again. Because then after a3, he really has to play bishop takes knight. And then you can just play queen takes, and then you're fine, right?
If bishop takes knight, I would still play b takes.
You play b takes?
Yeah.
But then the problem is he can play b5, c4, and bishop b7, and then
Okay.
you have that problem on e4.
Yeah, on the c file.
Right, and if you ever play e4, he plays e5, and then your bishop's blocked in for the whole game. So, yeah, I would play queen takes there.
Okay.
But, because then what you're going to try to do is you're going to try to play b3 and bishop b2, and try to use that c3 and b2 diagonal to try to get some pressure on his king.
Yeah, I thought of that, but then I was hoping he just takes c takes d.
Yeah, I understand. So after a4, he played queen e7. I wasn't so sure that he was going to play, like, b6. I thought he might just play b6 right away. But I guess he wanted to get his queen off the d file, which made some sense. So yeah, so here the problem is, like, when you played a4, okay, yeah, you stopped b5, but now his bishop on b4 is a permanent, like, fixture, so, like, you never know when he's going to take that knight. So after you played e4, like, he could have just played pawn takes pawn here, which he did, and then he could have just played bishop takes knight here after knight takes pawn, because then you can't play queen takes because he can play knight takes e4. So you have to play pawn takes, and then that's ugly for you because he can play knight c5, and then he's starting to get his pieces in. He plays knight c5, he plays b6, bishop b7, and that e4 pawn is a big target for him, or for you rather.
Yeah.
So you have to be kind of careful that when you play e4 that you're not overlooking something.
Yeah, e4 is tricky.
Yeah, it was tricky because after I also suggested queen c5. Let me go back for a second. After queen c2 went out 94. After queen c2 94 because he can just 94 for white. You mean? It's possible, but you don't really want to trade this knight on c3 for this knight on f6, c-smith. So okay, so yeah, so after pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn, yeah, he should have played bishop takes c3, and then isolated your pawn on c3, and then he just brings his rooks to the c file and puts pressure on that c3 pawn.
Yeah, and now I see why a4 is not as good.
Yeah, exactly. So after queen c5, you actually found a very good move, which was the only move actually, knight ce2. You saw, yeah, you actually missed something else. You said after queen d3 you're worried about rook d8, but after queen d3 he also has knight e5, forking your queen and bishop and just winning the bishop. So you were right to not play queen d3, but you had the wrong reason. So
yeah. Now I'm seeing that.
Yeah. But you had the right intuition, which is important. So it's not necessarily necessary for you to know, for you to have the right reason to play the move, but your intuition was correct that queen d3 couldn't be good. But yeah, knight e5 was better than rook d8 of queen d3. So you played knight c2, which is the only move, which is correct. And he played knight takes e4, which is I suggested originally on stream. But after knight takes e4, do you know you missed the win here?
I thought I had something because his king was... I'm not sure how...
So you actually mentioned it one move later, but if you play knight takes e6 right now, that just wins. You see why?
Yeah, okay.
Because if knight takes e6, you're forking his queen and his rook, so he has to take back. Then you play bishop takes pawn check, he has to move his king, and then you simply play queen takes e4. And you just win a pawn, right? Because you're moving your bishop from attack, and you're
because
taking
his bishop on c8 is so blocked.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why these types of tactics usually can't work.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you play bishop e3, which is also a good move, but unfortunately allowed him to kind of untangle with knight d6, because now he's attacking the bishop on
counter stuff.
c4. Yeah. So basically he's up a pawn, but you were correct in that you have good development. but you overlooked that idea he had with knight b6 to d5, which kind of neutralized your c-file pressure. So you played rook
Yeah.
c1. I thought I thought you might try b3. Actually, I know you were thinking that in the game, and I thought you would play b3, and then if knight takes, you play pawn takes, and then try to exploit the fact that his queen was on a bad square.
Yeah, like yeah.
But the problem is like your pawns are too weak. Like a4 and c4, like you can't really generate anything concrete with those pawns being so weak, and he can always blockade them with his knights.
Yeah.
So I think you probably made the correct practical choice in playing rook c1. Okay, but he can force a queen trade now. Okay, so after bishop e7, now you have to get a little creative, I think, because like you saw, he played knight b6, knight d5. So I think here you have to play a5 first. So the idea of a5 is to not allow knight b6,
Okay.
and also to kind of freeze his queenside pawns, because you want to obviously stop his bishop from developing, right? Because that's
Yeah.
the one trump you have.
Yeah. A5 is strong.
Right. So a5, it kind of discourages b6, it discourages b5, and also it stops knight b6, and also gets you ready to double the rooks. So when you're down a pawn, you kind of have to look for ways that he can, because you were correct to kind of notice that his bishop on c8 was a bad piece, and that was where your compensation lied for the fact that you were down a pawn. So you kind of have to make sure that you do everything in your power to make sure that he can't get that bishop out easily. Like you have to make sure that he's going to sacrifice something to get that bishop out. So I think a5 would have been a slightly better try. But I mean, rook c1 looked like a very natural move. It's just unfortunately, once he got his knight to d5, it kind of glued his position together. So he played knight b6, knight d5, which is a very good idea by him, by the way. So yeah, your rook had to retreat. And then he played bishop d7, which is another very good move, I thought, because now he got his bishop out, rather than taking your bishop on e3. Your bishop on e3 is a strong piece, but while his knight's on d5, he should take advantage of the bishop on being able to move the bishop to d7.
Yeah.
So after knight c3, I thought he should just simply take on c3, then take on a4. So I thought you had to play something like b3 here to defend that pawn. I know it's kind of ugly, but and then after rook c8, then you can maybe try something like knight c3. But I mean, now just hanging a second pawn, I think, is almost disastrous for you. So I think he should have just taken on c3 and taken on a4. But already the position's starting to get tough for you because his pieces are starting to come out, and his pieces are starting to become more active than yours. And he has the two bishops too, and having the two bishops is really tough to play against because he can control all the squares. So, but yeah, so he played knight b4, which is a little. He was trying to be a little fancy, but you played rook d2, which is good. So he played bishop c6, and now you took the bishop kind of quickly. I think it was a correct move, but I'm trying to think you could have done something different. Probably not. Probably knight takes bishop was correct, just because like if he's allowed to play like bishop d5 or something, like I can't see you ever winning that, because then he's just gonna get his rooks on c8 and d8, and I mean he's gonna eventually create a pass pawn, and it's gonna be bad news for you. So I like taking it, because then you had rook d7, which is a cute move. I actually thought you were gonna play, instead of rook d7, I originally suggested bishop d6, only because now you're stopping a rook from coming to d8.
Yeah.
But I mean, I liked your move too. I'm not sure which one is better, to be honest. I think actually your move might be better, but it's just my move came into mind first because I kind of wanted to stop him from playing anything on the queen side, and bishop b6 kind of blocks his queen side pawns and stops his rook from coming to d8. But maybe he has something like bishop d8 there, and that's a little awkward.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe then you can play bishop c5 and rook d7. Then I don't know. But I mean, rook d7. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I like that move as well. So after rook d7, he played rook b8, which was pretty much forced. So here you saw that cute idea with bishop f4, which was good. So he played bishop f4, he played rook d8, and then now you took on e7.
Obviously, he was listening.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, here, could you maybe play...
Like after rook fd8?
Well, I was thinking, after rook fd8, I was thinking maybe you could try rook cd1, but I guess he can just... I guess he can just play e5 straight away there.
E5, but I'm gonna
Oh, you're
take.
gonna take it anyway? Yeah.
Maybe.
I thought maybe rook cd1 just to keep your rook on the 7th.
Yeah.
Because then you're actually legitimately threatening bishop takes rook. So maybe that would have been a slight improvement. But rook takes bishop, bishop takes rook, and knight e4 was good. But the problem is now he can get a rook on c8 and a knight on d5, and there's really no way for you to break through. So rook c8, rook d1, and then knight d5. So you played knight c3. I thought you were going to play knight d6 here.
Knight D6. Yeah, maybe.
And then he has to play like rook c7, and then maybe you play like b3 with the idea of knight c4. And then, so his knight's blocking the d file for you, and your knight's blocking the c file from him. And it's tough
Yeah.
for him to win that 4 versus 3 in that rook and knight ending. But playing knight c3, unfortunately, allows... It's basically like a lost rook and pawn ending for you. So you have to try to keep the knights on, especially when your rook is so passive. Because after you play knight c3 and he took, and he played g6, now you're basically losing a pawn on the queen side by force. Because
I was actually going for a knight D6, putting a knight on like the rook, but then I don't know, I lost it or something happened.
yeah, well, you ended up trading knights because I think you thought that you would have had chances in the rook ending.
Yeah,
Uh,
maybe.
Yeah,
But after a
so
knight
unfortunately though,
C3,
this rook ending is lost for you, just because you have back rank issues and your pawns are too weak on the queen side. So he can win a
yeah,
pawn by force on the queen side. So he played this part fairly well. I thought he should have played c4 earlier, but he played this part pretty well. The problem is when he played... Okay, so he played rook takes f4, which is fine. So yeah, this is still an easy win. Okay, so this is fine. He needs to keep his rook on the 5th rank though. He has to stop your king from coming in. So he should just simply play g5, f4, g4, f3 here. That's the simplest way to win,
yeah.
just to create a pass pawn, because you can't do anything. I mean, he could even try like rook e2 here, and then defend his pawn from the b file, but I
Or
mean, just creating
maybe
a
he
pass pawn
should
is
have
simplest.
went for my A pawn.
Yeah, exactly. But well, he played rook e4, and then he allowed you to play
Yeah.
king c5 and king d6. So here you actually missed something too. After king d6, instead of playing king takes pawn, you could have played c5 check first.
C5.
And then he has to play king d7, then you play king takes b7, and then you're threatening c6, c7, and c8. And then if he plays rook b4, you play king takes a6, and then you're up, then you actually win both your pawns back. And that's actually a really good position for you. So that slight finesse of c5 first probably would have...
Yeah, C5.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, now this transposes into a lost ending. He can't take c4. He should play rook e2, rook takes g2, and then like rook a2, and try to stop you that way. And then try to hope that his pass pawns are enough to distract your rook. Because then he'd have like 3 extra pawns on the king side, and his king would be really far away. So he'd have to sacrifice his rook for the pawn on a7 eventually, but then he'd use his king on c5, and he'd just play... So you wouldn't have a g2 pawn, and he would... and maybe not even an h2 pawn. And then those 4 pawns are going to be more than your rook on c1. He's just going to play e5, e4, f4, e3, and then if you move your rook on the e file, he can just play h5, h4, and eventually your rook will have to sacrifice itself for some pawns, and it won't be enough. So he still could have won this, I think, but trading into the king
Yeah,
pawn ending was
so
lost.
if I don't play C5, then maybe black wins.
Yeah, exactly. But if you play c5, like, he's struggling to draw then. Whereas if you don't play c5, like, you're struggling to draw. Like, you might be able to draw this anyway, but, I mean, he's the one who has the chances to win for sure. So, but now I mean, time pressure he took on c4, and then this is lost because you queen, and he only gets to e2. And I thought, actually, I thought you were just going to play queen a6, winning the pawn, but of course, what you did was fine too. I mean, it was just time pressure, but queen a6 was a little faster. But yeah,
Yeah.
so it worked out, and he won. So that was a really good game, actually. A lot of tactics were involved in a somewhat quiet position. But yeah, you just have
Yeah.
to be a little bit more careful about those pawn exchanges, because his position was his pieces weren't all developed, but he was able to generate some threats because all your pieces happened to be undefended.
And it was so funny how I had a better position even if I was down upon it. At the end, I'm losing because I'm liking of finding out the tactics and
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So yeah, originally he had tactics, then you had tactics, then then it kind of all just boiled down to an end game. But you had some threats, then he countered all your threats. I mean, it was very back and forth. It was a very seesaw game. So I thought
Yeah.
you guys both played, pretty well for the most part.